Welcome to the place where brains collide with science, wit, and a nerdy vibe. I'm Dr. Angel. Let's dive in where psychology meets a clever spin. Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.
How to stop attracting toxic people. We spent all the month of June talking about the subtle toxic traits. But now I want us to unpack some of why do we keep attracting that? Have you ever just felt like a magnet for drama, chaos, or, well, the human equivalent of like a tornado wrapped up in red flags? You're not alone, and you're definitely not broken. Spoiler alert, it's not because you secretly like being treated badly. Let's dive into the psychology why some of us keep attracting toxic people and what we can do about it to change the narrative. Dr. Angel, hey, welcome to Nerdy Psychology, where we turn the brain science into straight up life hacks. I'm Dr. Angel, your quirky, question asking, boundary loving guide to all things in the human behavior. And if you're into decoding emotional chaos with a dash of humor and a sprinkle of science, well, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community of curious minds who, well, we're not afraid to go deep and get nerdy and laugh a little while healing a lot. All right, let's cue the brainwaves and bring those metaphorical lab coats because we're unpacking why some of us attract toxic people like they're like handing out free concert tickets to our self-worth. Psychological roots of attraction to toxic people. So let's start with this. Our brains are constantly searching for patterns. Our brain loves patterns, and not just, Sudoku puzzles or parking spaces. We're talking relational patterns. So if we grow up in patterns of chaos or criticism or unpredictable caregivers, our nervous system might register that dysregulation as familiar. And we've talked about in many episodes, familiar, our brain thinks is safe. I once had a client, let's call her Casey, who kept dating people who would just ghost her. They would love bomb her, or, well, they would guilt trip her for having boundaries. She didn't want that, but it felt normal to her. And that's the key. The brain isn't looking for healthy, it's looking for familiar. So if what's familiar isn't healthy, we find ourselves walking back into those patterns time and time and time again. And so this is what is sometimes called repetition compulsion. It's a concept that Freud talks about that basically says we unconsciously reenact old wounds, hoping for a different outcome, kind of literally the definition of insanity from Einstein, doing the same things over and over and over and expecting different results. Another example, maybe you keep choosing bosses who micromanage you, like an overcritically parent, or friends who guilt trip you every time you set a boundary. It could be the same script, just different costumes and players with different names. I once knew a woman who had been married 5 times before she even turned 30. And when we unpacked the traits of the people that she'd married, it was the same thing over and over. They all just had different names. And here she was wearing the shame of all these multiple failed marriages. But we had to go back and find how we got in this pattern and how we can make it healthy to get back out. So the role of our attachment wounds and familiarity. And I know it's kind of something that people are talking about a lot is attachment and those attachment wounds. And they're important because when we have them, attachment wounds aren't just childhood sob stories. They're literal blueprints Blueprints. Think about what is a blueprint. A blueprint is a thing that an architect and an engineer puts together. So when they're building something, they know where all the pieces need to go, where all the wires need to go, where all the plumbing pieces need to go, where the walls and drywall needs to go. They know where the footers and the supports for foundation and roof supports, they know all those things go in blueprints. I know I'm not a builder, but our brain uses the same type of concept to evaluate safety. It uses the blueprints, except it doesn't have wonderful architects and engineers who have all this school and experience of putting together this great blueprint. Our brain, our beautiful brain, is making its blueprint out of our experiences. It's making its blueprint from the things we have been through, have seen, have been familiar with from the very moment we've been born. Our brain is creating its blueprint. And our earliest bonds taught us, if your earliest bonds taught you that love equals walking on eggshells or that you're never enough, your adult relationships, well, they just might mirror that, because it's what your brain put into the blueprint and learn to expect. So I want us to kind of do a quick overview about attachment styles, just so we can be talking about the same thing in the same language for just a minute. Secure attachment. Secure attachment, you feel safe. You can give and receive love. You feel safe. Boundaries aren't a problem. They're not scary. These secure attachment relationships, we trust ourselves, we trust the other, and they're usually very balanced and very healthy relationships. These are the relationships we want to have in our brain blueprint. However, the other attachment styles can be those that we might have in our brain blueprint. So there's something called an anxious attachment. And that's where you might crave closeness, but you're afraid of abandonment. So you may overfunction in a relationship just to keep it intact, be over accommodating, maybe smothering in that relationship, whatever, just to keep it intact because you don't want the abandonment, that feeling of abandonment in that relationship. Or there's also avoidant attachment styles. And that's where an individual, they value independence so much that connecting and interdependence, it feels like a threat. So when people start to get too close, this type of attachment style will start to push that person away, and it sends a message very confusing to the other side person, like, what just happened? How is this happening? And so that's that avoidant attachment. And then we have a disorganized attachment style. And this one's really the trickiest. It's really where someone's caught between wanting love and fearing love. So usually, typically, this type of attachment style may come from a trauma background. And so it's like this push-pull effect. Like, you crave it, but then you don't want it, so you push it away, and you're constantly in relationships that are in the cycle of push and pull with that type of attachment style. Now, I get it. This was a very quick, basic description of the attachment styles, and this is something that could be multiple episodes all by themselves, but I just wanted to kind of give an overview. Knowing your style, it doesn't box us in. These are not permanent fixtures in our life. People may function in one style and can move to other attachment styles within their life. So knowing what our style is not setting up this lifelong description. It's just understanding our emotional GPS. And when we understand our emotional GPS, we can start redirecting when it's leading us down the same dead end street. And I know most of us have all used GPSs, Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever. And you're driving, when you leave your house, it like tells you all the streets to take just from your own house. Like you haven't driven that 1,000 times. And so sometimes we're using the map because where we're going, we may not be familiar with, but we know part of the journey. And it might tell you to make a really weird turn. And you're just like, why would I make that turn when I could just take this road and it's quicker or it's safer or it's more direct or whatever. And so how many times, you'll hear your GPS go, make a U-turn at the next light or whatever. And you're like, why would I do that? It's like where I'm trying to get to. Like, this is what we're wanting to do with our emotional GPS. When we know our attachment style, when we're aware of things, when we're aware of what's triggering those things, we can start redirecting when our emotional GPS is trying to say, go here. And we realize, no, that's not really where I want to go. It's leading me down a place that doesn't end well for me. It's not a good street for me, proverbially speaking. So why red flags might feel like, comfort. Well, this part can be hard to swallow, but red flags, they can just feel like home. If someone gives you the silent treatment, your brain says, yep, I know this one. I'm familiar with this one. That's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system has equated unpredictability with intimacy. Brene Brown once said, we are wired for connection, but not at the cost of authenticity. Translation, connection without safety isn't real connection. Have you ever had someone treat you really, really kind, like suspiciously kind, and it felt super weird to you? That is totally not a flaw in your character. It's a clue your nervous system needs a new normal, needs a healthy GPS route and street to go on. And if you're not sure what red flags to even look for, go check out our Subtle Traits of Toxic Relationship series. That's where we break down behaviors like gaslighting and love bombing and guilt tripping that can sneak under our radar. Point 4, steps toward building a new relational template. We are building the new blueprint for ourselves, emotionally speaking. So how do we break the cycle? First, aware. We need to recognize it, be aware of it, look at it, put words to it, even if they're just words on paper to yourself. We do not and cannot change what we do not name, what we do not recognize, what we do not identify. So start by noticing. Notice, how do you feel in that relationship? How do you feel in that situation? What does that feel? Do you feel safe? Do you feel respected? Or do you feel anxious or confused? Next, we're going to surround ourselves with, safe people. We want to identify, which people do I feel the most safe with? And we want to surround ourselves with those people, even if it feels boring at first. Because safety should feel boring when you're used to drama. And I'm going to say that again. Safety should feel boring when you're used to living in drama. A green flag relationship, it may not give you, all that intense emotional and back and forth and the butterflies, but it gives you peace. It gives you comfort. It gives you safety. It helps you build confidence. It helps you build trust. I'm going to give you another example. A client, we'll call him Chris. He used to think his girlfriends wasn't passionate because, they didn't argue. And so he would judge his relationships based on how loud and how often they would argue, because then he thought that was equated to how much they loved him and how much passion they had. But it turns out he was just used to associating yelling equals love in his world. And once he started to recognize that was not a healthy part on my blueprint for my relationships. He learned to change that GPS and starting to appreciate calm and steady vibes in individuals when he was dating them. Also, we want to create mantras or affirmations. We want to speak those things for ourselves. We want love doesn't need to hurt to be real. Love doesn't need to be drama to be real. Peace and calm is not boring. Peace and calm is not a red flag. Like, these little reminders help us to reroute our GPS, our old neuro pathways in our brain, start reinforcing our healing journey. We have to recognize, identify, and redirect them so that we're going on the streets we want to go on. We're going to the destination we want to be on instead of the destination that we've always been on. So some action steps, because we're going to give you some action steps here. So let's get practical. Journal our past patterns with compassion. Look at them. This isn't about blaming yourself. This isn't about condemnation. This is about write out. Look at your past patterns. Talk about, where did you meet? How did the relationship go? How long did you have the relationship? What made you feel good about the relationship? What broke up the relationship? What made you not feel good? Like, write down, if it's a matrix, if it's a spreadsheet, if it's a narrative, look at each of those relationships in our life. And this can be friends, it can be romantic relationships, it can be our family relationships. Write out our past relationships, because we need to look for emotional themes. Were you always the fixer? Were you always the chaser? Were you always the over accommodating one? Identify 3 red flags that maybe you used to ignore in your relationships, or make an excuse for, or try to accommodate. I can't tell you the number of times I talk to people in a relationship that's unhealthy, or a relationship that has just ended, and they look and they can see all these red flags, and they're like, oh my gosh, Dr. Angel, this happened and this happened and this happened, but I thought I could change them, or I thought I could make it better, or I thought I could make them love me. And then they feel this shame in them. Let's just look at, what are 3 red flags we used to ignore? Not, again, for shame and guilt and condemnation, for awareness. Maybe it was those subtle put downs. Maybe it was disappearing acts, or silent treatments, or guilt tripping. Make a list and keep it so visible so you learn to catch these red flags before they turn into fire alarms, before they bring us into that pain. We want to catch it in real time, not just to have one red flag and be like, oh, never mind, I'm out. No, but so that we're aware, oh, that could be a red flag. That could be one of my red flags that I'm not sure of. But let me just be aware and see what happens, and give it a space. That's okay too. Or maybe it's a deal breaker red flag and you're like, nope, that's one of those red flags that I can't compromise on. And we're able to navigate that in real time, so that we're not feeling the hindsight look and reflection, but the real time look and reflection. We don't want to have to keep putting out fires in our relationships. So we want to visualize, what does a healthy relationship look like? What does that even mean to you? I ask people that question. They look at me very confused. They're like, what do you mean? What does a healthy relationship look like? What does it look like? How would you know your relationship was healthy? Literally, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to stop. Pause the video if you need to. Close your eyes and imagine, what would it feel like to be with somebody who respects your no, who celebrates your wins, who doesn't make love conditional, who can problem solve with you, who works with you, who encourages you. Visualization trains our brain's mirror neurons to start training that body to accept and expect better. Attracting toxic people is not a moral failing. It's just a sign of old survival strategies that completely no longer serve you. But here is the wonderful part. Remember, you can rewire, relearn, and re-choose. And that's the beauty of being human and of, well, being nerdy about your own personal growth. If this episode resonated with you, drop a comment below. What's one red flag you'll never ignore again? Let's get real and help each other grow. Make sure to subscribe to Nerdy Psychology so you never miss another episode where healing meets humor and science meets soul. Until next time, stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy. See you next week.
Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.